are continuing with the Vrindavan experience, hearing from Her Grace Jagattarini Mataji, speaking to us all the way from Perth, Australia. But where she lives, it's not Perth, Australia. It is Vrindavan. And in her heart, there is only Vrindavan. And so we are hoping to catch this Vrindavan in our own heart as she's going to open hers and let us capture this wonderful Vrindavan consciousness. We had a very good, wonderful time in the previous session, and we are now fully ready to enter the second session. Welcome, Jagattarini Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna to you all. And I feel very humbled by your description of what is in my heart. I'm so glad that you can't quite see inside my heart and that I can keep intact your wonderful explanation of what one should aspire for.
Before you start, Mataji, I want to say that we circulated the pictures that you had given us last time. And there were these pictures of the rocks with all your Vrindavan prayers, meditations and all. And they gained so much love from the devotees. Everybody was like throwing hearts at them.
Oh, lovely.
And I read them several times already. It's such a beautiful meditation. Thank you so much. It was very, very inspiring, very inspiring. So I'll let you speak. Please go ahead.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Vaskatya Deshatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this particular presentation, I think it's probably quite timely. I wanted to speak about what is the process for remembering Vrindavan in distress or in great difficulty? There's many reasons why somebody can be in great difficulty. It can be as dramatic as a world war, which is like hell on earth. Or it can be as simple as an argument with a friend or a family member, or a bout of bad health, or just some clearing of some doubts in the heart that are pushing against our faith and making us feel uncomfortable. There's a wide spectrum of why one may be facing difficulty. And it's also important to note that just as a boat crossing the ocean goes up and down, up and down, up and down with the waves, difficulty of some sort or another is going to be there. So what do I do and what do I experience when I'm actually in difficulty? We can look at the heroes. We can look at the great devotees in our association. We can look at the great examples of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'm not speaking to them because they're far above me. they're anchored in their strength of faith. I'm speaking instead, you could say, to myself and to others who actually feel frightened, who feel destabilized in difficult situations, and trying to reconcile what one does under such circumstances. Now, there are two experiences that I want to share with you. The first one took place for me in probably 1998, a long time ago, before we had our Govardhan retreats. And it was a visit from a friend of mine from New Zealand who encouraged me to come with her to visit her brother, who lived quite a distance away on the side of an inlet. Now, an inlet, just in case you've never seen one, is like a section of land that becomes covered by water according to the tides coming from the waves of the ocean, which is coming from nearby. It becomes full of salty water during the high tide. And during the low tide, the tide recedes completely and the land is not covered hardly at all. So we arrived at her brother's house in the afternoon and the tide was high. So we went out to look at his garden. She showed me the property. We looked at this beautiful spread of water, so tranquil, so fresh, so refreshing. And it was so stimulating looking at this. It looked like a huge lake, a vast quantity of water. And then we went to bed and we woke up, and in the morning I came out to chant and I walked to the same place. And to my astonishment, there was no water at all. And in fact, in replacing the water, there was all these rough, large, ugly shaped rocks. It looked like a barren field of rocks. And it was, to me, at that moment, it was, shall I say, it was profoundly disconcerting. Because just moments before, hours before, it had looked entirely different. So we spoke in depth to her brother because it was fascinating. What was it? Well, it was an inlet. It wasn't a lake. It wasn't a desert. It was a place that filled up with water sometimes and receded at other times. So when I was preparing to talk with you, this particular experience came back to my memory. And I was even asking myself, what was the relevance of that to what I want to share with you today? And perhaps it was the stark contrast between one moment and the next, and trying to reconcile the extremity of the difference between the two. And quite personally, I see when I'm having difficulty, I suddenly feel as though I'm empty. I have no faith. I have no right to have faith because I'm so imperfect. And I certainly don't have enough faith, trust, knowledge, help to face the challenges of life that are going to be inevitable. And then, like rocks jutting out from the environment, I see problem after problem after problem I see problems I've never seen before. I see possibilities in the future of such danger for me that I can hardly sleep because the risk has become so high. And all the while, there's another part of my thinking process that is trying to allay the fear, to calm down this rocky landscape and restore some stability. And oftentimes what happens is that we get involved in this. It's like a debate within ourselves. No, it's not this, it's this. No, but there's this. No. In our thinking processes become entangled in how to fix something that's actually somewhat imaginary. Of course, there are times when the problems and the dangers are real. And then we have to listen very carefully to the guidance that comes through our trained intelligence, even if it's not trained fully. But most of the time, we'll find that the mind takes off by itself. I think I'm perhaps not the only one who experiences this, particularly, as I said, with ill health or other challenges. So what to do? Here is a question. What can I do? And what does my Vrindavan experience or my attempt to approach Vrindavan as my shelter at a time when my inner workings doesn't want to? It wants to find out more about my problem. It wants to try to solve the problem. It doesn't want to speak to other people who may not understand, and so on. Well, one thing I know is that Vrindavan is like a magnifying glass. I think you all must have had some experience of this. That in Vrindavan, things become magnified and amplified. And there's a great benefit to this because it gives you an opportunity to look at things that are highly enlarged and deal with them. Just like if I'm teaching children in a school, I might be teaching them basic alphabet, but I don't write the letters in a small way on the board. I write them very big because I want those children to see them, to get these as memories, as impressions that will teach them further writing and comprehension. So when we go over the times we've spent in Vrindavan, whether it's days, hours, months, or years, we'll find that there are sprinkled throughout that time valuable lessons that are meant to be activated when there's difficulty. And our challenge is how to activate them when I'm not there in Vrindavan where they're written on the board big. I'm here in Perth, Western Australia, where the atmosphere around me is materialistic, completely materialistic. How am I going to restore the tranquility aspect of that inlet? By that I mean that yes, by very nature there's going to be rocky times, and by very nature there's going to be fullness. And how am I going to bring that fullness closer to me in my memory, in my thoughts, when all I see around me is rocky? So one thing is, and I think we have a photo of this, I turn to Vrinda Devi. Do we have a Vrinda Devi photo there?
Yes, Mataji, it will just come up in a minute.
Okay. So I turn to Vrinda Devi because Vrinda Devi is the presiding deity of Vrindavan. And so it's through Vrinda Devi's mercy that we even got to put our feet in the dust of Vrindavan. And it's through Vrinda Devi's mercy that we have an impression of any kind that Vrindavan is a transcendental place. So my prayers go oftentimes to Vrinda Devi. And there's a beautiful prayer, perhaps many of you know it, an Astakam, the Vrinda Devi Astakam. And when we sing, which sometimes in distress we don't feel like doing, but when we sing, we have a chance to pull our mind back into some connection with something that is whole and real. If Vrinda Devi doesn't want to come right now, we shall continue and see her later. What do you think, Rameshwari?
Balaji Priya is actually trying to share.
Okay.
Ambika, could you make me co-host, please? Could you make VIHE co-host?
So,
co-host now.
that's a quote. That's a quote from the Vrindavan Mahimamrita, not for now, a little later. Yes, there we go. Vrinda Devi. So here we see Vrinda Devi at Vrinda Kund. And there's a beautiful marble deity there. And the deity is decorated at the same standard, as you can see, that we decorate the deities in the Krishna Balaram Mandir. However, when I first heard about Vrinda Devi, there was a different deity presiding at Vrinda Kund in a little cement hut, not an elaborately beautiful Rajasthani miniature palace. And that deity of Vrinda Devi was installed by Madhava Baba and was worshipped there in a simple Brijbasi way. That deity, to our eye, would look very, very quaint, perhaps a little bit less potent than this beautiful form that we see here. But in actuality, the potency, the devotion that can be given and received between ourselves and Vrinda Devi was no different then than it is now. The thing that is different is that now it's more accessible to us because we can relate more to the beauty of this form of Vrinda Devi. But it's Vrinda Devi alone who gives us memory of Vrindavan and access to Vrindavan. Because this is Vrinda Devi's service to Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. Thank you. So, one thing I try to remember when I'm in difficulty and danger is that difficulty and danger also appears in Vrindavan. We hear about the birth of Krishna's brothers and how each one of them were killed. And sometimes we listen to a lila as if it's a story. We don't invest because we don't know how, because it's a transcendental description, but we don't invest emotionally in what is being said. We don't know how, perhaps. But one after another, these babies were killed. As soon as they were born, they were killed. And when Krishna appeared, it was of the greatest urgency for Vasudeva to take him as far from Mathura as possible. So there, right there in Krishna's appearance, there's difficulty. So if there's difficulty in Vrindavan as well, one part of my mind will say, well, if there's difficulty in Vrindavan as well, then there's no shelter. Even Vrindavan is going to be troublesome. But a more intelligent thought is that if there's difficulty also in Vrindavan, then I should look at my difficulty differently. I should expect it, and I should pray for guidance and inspiration how to deal with the particulars of that situation. Now, I'd like to share with you another incident that occurred in my life, which was barely significant. I think about it a lot, but it was such a tiny event that it was almost like you blinked and it was gone. Before telling you that, I will tell you of an experience that happened to me long before, when I was traveling with a young girl who was living with us at the time. We were going to shopping and she was driving, and we came to a highway and there was a sign that said stop. And she slowed down, and clearly the whole highway was empty. There was not a car in sight. So she slowed down and then she turned the corner. And as soon as she turned the corner, a siren went off and a police car was following us. So the policeman took her over to the side of the road and said to her, do you know you just went through a stop sign? Now, she was very pretty and kind of like a little flippant. So she used her sweetness and her eyes, and she said to him, but there was no traffic on the road. And he wasn't moved by her coyness. And she said, I slowed down, and he wasn't moved. And then he looked at her and he handed her through the window of the car a ticket for $100. And she looked at it and her eyes filled with tears. And she looked back at him and she said, can't you let me off? And he looked back at her with kindness and he said, if I take away the ticket now, you will forget this experience. But if I give you the ticket, you will remember it for the rest of your life. And with that, he walked away. And boy, oh boy, I remember it for the rest of my life. She turned to me, almost crying, and said, I just went and took a job in cleaning a filthy apartment to earn some money to go to Vrindavan. And yesterday I earned $100. And today it's being taken away from me. Sometimes we feel like that. But the policeman wasn't moved, and he wasn't cruel either. He wanted her to learn some boundaries. And perhaps I think when if she ever passes by that same location again, she'll stop. For sure, she'll stop. And she will remember that she was halted at that particular junction. That wasn't my experience that I wanted to share with you, but it has some relevance. So in 2012, we completed our beautiful Sacred India gallery. And I didn't bring any pictures to show here because there's no pictures and there's no videos practically that can actually give you the experience of what it's like to be in that space. It's incredibly beautiful. And it's like a whole experience of being in being in Vrindavan practically. And people come to the gallery and they walk through, people who know nothing about Vrindavan, nothing about even Indian spirituality. And they come out, we don't tell them very much. We don't try to tell them all that we know. We want them instead to have a taste, an experience. So they come through the gallery and they often write in the book that we get comments at the end. They write, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless. That was an experience that I didn't expect. So it took us 10 years of hard work to actually create that. And there were many times within 10 years that it seemed like it wasn't going anywhere, or it was just too hard. There were too many obstacles. There was too little money. There was too little commitment. We wouldn't finish it ever. But in September 2012, we had finished the gallery and we had a festival, a Sankirtan festival, to open the gallery. And to that festival, we invited many devotees who came from other places in Australia, and also Madhava, and a couple of other dear Kirtan friends. Now, for us, for you to do that in a temple, to do it in Vrindavan, you have a great resource. So many people can help with the cooking, with the cleaning. There are places for them to stay and so on. But for us, it was overwhelming what we were trying to achieve in a small setting without very much assistance. But my business was, for the first 2 evenings of the 3 evening programs, was to attend the kirtan. And so I went into the kirtan, and by Krishna's mercy, it was very deep. For me, it was very deep. It was like a sense of offering something, feeling the presence of Vrindavan. My mind was tranquilized. It wasn't mass functioning. I was just there. And I came out of the kirtan, it felt like I was in Vrindavan. I felt washed and bathed and grateful and peaceful and happy. On the third night, I had some duties to perform. I had to attend to those who were about to depart soon after the kirtan. And so I noticed the difference when my mind was bubbling with service responsibilities. So I came into the kirtan, and it was the same nourishing kirtan taking place. But I noticed that the devotees who were leaving were starting to get ready to go. There was less dancing in the center of the kirtan. And I was sitting there opening my eyes, closing my eyes, and thinking of many things. And so the kirtan wasn't very enlivening. I must admit, I couldn't get into the kirtan. You must have had this experience. So I was trying, but it was like bringing two magnets together with the same pole, and they weren't connecting. And then at a certain point, just during the kirtan, Vrindavan kirtan, playing the mridanga, he played a particular note or series of notes that he plays where he goes, something like that. And this sound, unconscious to me, I wasn't thinking about what was going on, my mind was elsewhere. This sound entered my ear of the sound of the mridanga beat. And it triggered something from my childhood watching movies, which was the sound when a bomb is dropped from a plane in a movie only, and it goes boom. And all of a sudden, my mind went totally outside of the kirtan to this experience of what it would be like if a bomb would drop. And I was sitting there for a minute or two, disoriented with this impression that had entered. And all of a sudden, I realized, you have to go back to the kirtan. You have to go back to the kirtan. And I was like, in a minute. And the response from, you could say, my higher voice of self said, there'll come a time when it won't go diddle, 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 diddle. There'll come a time when it will be time to leave the world. That time will come for everyone. Just as the rocks appear and disappear on a daily basis, there's a time when your life must end. And is your kirtan experience, yes, the bliss is wonderful, but is your kirtan, my kirtan, experience strong enough to hold you and anchor you under such great difficulty? And quite frankly, quite honestly, the answer was no. And then the understanding was, therefore, go back to the kirtan. Go back to the kirtan. Your mind has taken you to a dangerous situation that may one day occur. But now you're in the kirtan. Go back to the kirtan. Go back to the kirtan. And it wasn't easy, because it was very easy for me to go into thinking about what that dangerous situation might be like. So Vrindavan Vas, living in Vrindavan, it's meant to become deeply impressed upon our heart. And it truly actually isn't a quantity thing, it's a quality thing. And in some ways, it's harder the longer you stay there to retain that quality of focus. During that kirtan, there was only 10 minutes more of kirtan, but my mind required that discipline. And then after that, I ran and got myself active and busy with all sorts of things, and I temporarily forgot. So Vrindavan is full of activity if you live there. It's both your home and your worshipable place. So one has to work twice as hard to get twice as much benefit there. But for us who are living away from Vrindavan, what do we do? Well, the first thing I always say is go over your memories, journal on them, try to bring them back. See if you can take some time to remember something that happened to you when you were in Vrindavan. And if you're not in Vrindavan and have not been in Vrindavan, then ask somebody, what experiences they have had themselves in Vrindavan. And do make the effort, although you'll feel a little foolish perhaps because you won't be able to do it. But do make the effort to bring your mind back, no matter how many times you find it wanders away again. So I hope that these little experiences may be, in a sense, comforting. They're not comforting in the way it's comfortable to hear something reassuring, but they may be comforting in the sense that we realize that we have work to do, that we have inner work to do, and Shastra and all our devotional practices are giving us the opportunity to do that. Prabhupada said, I was just reading this morning, he said, the benediction of Bhagavat Prasad, or I add this, or Vrindavan Seva, is never lost. It is simply to be enjoyed. Now, we spend a lot of time telling people not to enjoy the material world, but we also encourage them to enjoy Vrindavan. And we don't mean Loy Bazaar and the restaurant food and catching up with all your friends from all over the world. We mean enjoy Vrindavan, experience Vrindavan, take in Vrindavan when you can. So it is simply to be enjoyed. Hearing about Vrindavan is also Vrindavan. There is no question of loss, Prabhupada says. It is simply gain and enjoying gaining. So this we need to be reassured about, because difficulties aren't fun. And if we go through a prolonged period of difficulty, we feel sometimes a chronic weakness occurs. So then at those times in weakness, we think, well, how could I enjoy? How could I be happy? How could I ever be happy again? And the answer is, come a little closer, take a little step forward towards Vrindavan. This transcendental achievement is so greatly valuable that no material happiness can compare to it. This is the Bhagavatam reassuring us, encouraging us, like small children trying to stand up and walk and falling over again and again. And the parents aren't concerned about the falling over. They're concerned about the getting up again. So get up again and try again. I often think how the material world, it programs everyone, particularly nowadays, through the technology, which is mechanistic, right? Technology theoretically doesn't make mistakes. Human beings make mistakes. Human beings put the wrong number in their password and can't get into their app. But technology is irreversibly, mechanistically perfect. This is the mindset we're educated in. So then, along with this technology comes the idea of high achievement, especially for those who are a little intelligent or very intelligent or talented in some way. They should entrepreneur or take their talents and make good of them. And to do that in a highly competitive world, you've got to be really good. You've got to be up there. You've got to persevere and work hard. And many good qualities come along with this sense of achievement, trying to be number one. But oddly enough, it doesn't work as well in spiritual life. It's a good starting point to be number one, to get top marks, to not make any mistakes, to learn everything that we can, to get moving. It's a good starting point. But over time, we have to recognize that we have to hand over our power and control to Krishna. We have to recognize, for example, our littleness in relationship to the whole, even the whole cosmic creation, even the whole planet, what to speak of the whole universe, what to speak of the whole material world. If we don't bend and become flexible in our sense of self-control and self-achievement, then it's very shocking when we see how insignificant we actually are. And it can be very disconcerting. It can be a difficulty. But it can be a difficulty that is very essential for our future growth. We have a tree on our property. It's a macadamian tree. And anybody who has ever seen a macadamian nut, anyone who has tasted a macadamian nut will be able to understand that they're like a refinement. They're very exceptionally soft and sweet. And yet, the macadamian nut is encased doubly. It's a bit like us, isn't it? There's an outer covering, a shell that is so hard. It's thick and hard. It's the hardest nut shell of any nut in the world. And to get to the next layer, you have to get this press that puts the nut inside a cavity, and then you turn a lever on the top, and it brings down this heavy, flat, pressing action that cracks that shell. And then you can take it out. However, there are two shells that need to be cracked. If you break the outer shell off because it opens after some time and it's easier to pull off, there's another shell inside that also requires the same treatment. And if you get both those shells off, or somebody gets both those shells off, you have a wonderful experience of what is actually on the inside. So Krishna is putting us sometimes through the macadamia nut unshelling process. And we need all of our strength, all the blessings of others, all the prayers to Vrindavan Devi, all the effort we can put in such times to not withstand and not try to put things back the way they were before, not long to reconstruct the outer shell and make it tight again, but to let him open us up. And it's easy to talk about. And if we're going through an experience that's doing that, we know that whilst it's easy to talk about, it's not so easy to actually accept the difficulty as extraordinarily loving embrace from Krishna on our behalf. Now, we have 15 minutes left. So I've talked and talked. My apology for taking your questioning time. But does anyone have any questions?
Hare Krishna, Jagattarini Mataji.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful, wonderful class. I feel that you speak right to my heart, and that's why I wanted to ask a question. During the past month, my health condition went to really bad condition. I was in extreme pain. I was in pain when I was laying down in the bed at night. When I was trying to turn from side to another, I wasn't able to without really, really heavy struggle. I wasn't able to get up from the bed without really, really heavy struggle with that pain. And everything, putting clothes on, everything was such a struggle. And things that usually I'm very glad to do, they were struggle. And this topic about these difficulties that we have to face in life was just like perfect for this moment. So yesterday I was treated at the doctor, and now I'm like getting better.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Yes. But such struggle, and all things included. And because I found it hard to focus on doing practical things like I always did. I took care of the deities, and I cooked as I could, and all these things, and cleaned up as I could. But these things are usually those things that I personally do every day, which remind me of Krishna and elevate the consciousness. And I was so sad. I cried a lot. And then again, there was this war, and I'm in a country which is next to Russia. I'm in Finland, so you never know. Finland may also be under threat very soon. So it's been so heavy and so difficult to keep the consciousness elevated. VIHE is helping a lot. A lot.
Yes.
Such a
essentially, yes.
Yes, and of course chanting and these things. But what would be your instruction for such like difficult times? We got Vrindavan Devi, which is wonderful. But would you be able to say something personally, or?
It's not a light, easy to answer question, because your struggle is real. Sometimes we're talking to somebody who's theorizing, but in your situation, the situation that you're faced with, it has a reality to it, a temporary reality. We know that, but a pressingness to it. So one thing I have noted is that when you're in greater danger, there's access to greater mercy, because Krishna is there with you, and he's aware of the situation. And sometimes we're in great danger from our own fears that have no basis in fact. Like, say, if somebody's lying in a room at night and it's dark and they think there could be someone outside, there could be many things could happen, and so I'm so frightened, please help me. Sometimes we create the fear, and then what happens is perhaps Krishna doesn't appear to respond to it because that fear is not really real. It's something that naturally is created by darkness. And in those cases, sometimes he asks us to work on our fear alone by our own thoughtfulness, our own recollection of times when he has protected us. One thing I do when I can't control my anxiety is I take the Bhaktivedanta database. Do you have that on your computer? And I just put words in. Fear, scared, this, that. And it's not that I get magic answers, and it's not that the answers allay the whole thing, but I use that period of fear to find some more foothold for the next time that I'm afraid. As for ill health, it's not an easy one either, because it robs you, like you're saying, you're to your credit, you're still performing your devotional activities. That's wonderful. At the same time, it takes away the joy. Yeah, you're like dragging yourself to do it, and it feels like, what's wrong with me? This was my source of joy, and now it's just like eating straw or worse. I try in that situation as best I can to find somebody who I can share with. If there's somebody even in another country or whatever, and I journal it. I journal it a lot. In other words, I'm trying to develop the habit of telling Krishna instead of listening to my mind. I was saying yesterday to somebody who found themselves in a situation that they believed was terrible. I was saying to them, you know, in dramas, in plays, you see, even in television, wherever, there's two kinds of dialogues go on. There's what's called a monologue, where in Shakespeare, where some character comes forward and talks and talks and talks and shares something. And then there's a dialogue. And in a dialogue, there's two. In a monologue, there's one. So we tend to create monologues in our head. We're just talking to ourselves. The mind is talking. Many people are talking in our head, but we're talking to ourselves. And what we're trying to learn to do is to create a dialogue. So I was saying to this person who was feeling overwhelmed, I said, so that's what prayer is. We're trying to create a dialogue. And they said to me back, they said, well, that's okay. A dialogue means two people are talking, but I don't hear anyone. I offer my prayers, but I don't hear anyone talking back to me. It still seems like, you know, with Krishna's not there for me. So then I was saying, look for signs like timing, that you feel something, you feel urgency for something, and something happens, and it coincides. And people call that a coincidence. It was amazing. I was this, and then that happened. But if you're praying, you don't see it as a coincidence, because you're connecting, trying to connect with Krishna in a feeble way, in a vulnerable way, and something comes back. And we learn to read sign language, because, you know, somebody who's deaf, they have to read sign language. And we're very deaf at this time. We can't hear Krishna. It's not that he's not talking, it's we can't hear him. So this sign language is very important. So look for signs and see kindness or shelter that comes to you, anything that comes to you. Be grateful to the person who provided it, but always connected also with Krishna. Make that a habit. Work on, there's a bit of self-development. Make that a habit. And so if you don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I'm confused, and philosophy is not entering, go to your habits. This is a habit. To see, this is practice. This is actually sadhana, the practice of how do I apply. And so this is one thing I would say. But I wouldn't say it lightly to you, because your situation is serious. It's circumstantially serious. So go with a depth that actually it's quite frightening right now. And I seriously need your protection. do remember also that surrender means, it's not surrender like this, like the Russians are coming. Surrender means go to your shelter. So imagine if there's a disaster occurring and you have a shelter and your shelter is completely safe. And you go to your shelter. Of course, you'll still feel anguish because you don't want all the other people to be suffering. That will be there, but at least you have a shelter. So part of that shelter that we go to is to accept that Krishna is my maintainer and Krishna is my protector. Strengthen those views. Look around you and see those things whenever you can. Thank you for sharing. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Related.
I just wanted to share one of my experience, which reminded me today when you were saying about the police incident.
Yes.
Just like Ambika Mataji, she explained that whatever you are talking is directly going inside the heart. So this is what the same feeling I had today. So this reminded me of an incident that happened when I was studying grade 8. It was my Hindi exam, and I was
Yes.
not quite very sure in Hindi subject. So I
Yes.
had a few papers in which I had written answers so that while I'm traveling in the bus, so I could look into it and just revise my syllabus. So with the anxiety to get inside the hall and other preparatory items, I forgot to take the slip out of my pocket.
Yes.
And I remember the same question had appeared in the question paper, and my mind was telling me, you have the slip inside your pocket, pull it out and see, pull it out and see. But then, but then I was telling to my mind, no, I cannot do this. I cannot cheat in the exam. But whatever the inside thing was going on, it was showing on my face. So the teacher, he caught me. He caught me and he asked me to pull the slip out of my pocket. And that was like a worst thing happening to me ever. So I just took that outside and I handed over to teacher, and he saw the answer, whatever I had written to memorize it, that had appeared in the question paper. So he thought that I was cheating in the exam, and he just took me outside to the principal room. And I was crying and I was telling, sir, I was not like, I don't have any intentions to copy in the exam. Please let me go and write my exam. Please don't do this. And the teacher said, actually, he was a very kind person. He didn't scold me or he didn't do anything. He just looked into my eyes and he said, if I let you this time, you will try to copy for the next. And if I let you free, even the other students who are looking around will think, okay, this is a common thing, even we can follow. But so he told these things to me, and he took me inside the principal room, and principal, she was very, like she didn't feel good about what I did. And then they called my parents, and my father came. Then I told to my father, I was crying and I told to my father, my intention was not to copy. So I was just in the anxiety and I forgot to keep this slip outside the exam hall. Then he believed me, and he asked forgiveness from the principal and the staff. So this was a really worst incident happening to me in my life. And again, I got this realization that never I should do this mistake again in my life. I should never trust my mind, and I should never do it again. So then after many years, out of a great fortunate, so it happened that I joined Bhakti Shastri course, and my first exam to give was Ishopanishad. And as you said in the class today, even though our intelligence is not perfectly trained but still we should trust it in sometimes. So I was thinking, I will not cheat anything in the exam. I'm not going to do anything. Like whatever I know, honestly, I'm going to present it. But then with this realization, Prashanta Mataji, she added some more to it. So for the first exam, she came and she did Kirtan, and she told a very inspiring thing to all the students. She said, you're not taking up this exam to compete with the other students. It is not to show that you are more intelligent than others.
Yes.
You are giving this exam just to please Srila Prabhupada, your teachers, and the Supreme Lord. With this intention, you should take up this exam.
Wonderful.
So what the imperfect understanding I had with my intelligence and what the spiritual teachings my teacher gave to me, it just combined and became a very good binding. And from
Wonderful.
that time to each and every exam I attempt, so I just close my eyes, I remember her words, and I remember my experience with the school, and I'll say to myself, yes, I'm giving this exam just for the pleasure of my teachers, not to
Wonderful.
compete with any students or not any personal motives. So I'm continuing like this. And recently, my exam was just 2 days before my cousin's wedding. And in India, wedding means something is happening in a very large thing. So it was
Yes.
so much of shopping and other these things. I could hardly find any time to study. And my cousins were telling me that it's okay, it's an online exam. If you want, you can cheat also. So I just straight away I told to them that I'm never going to do this in my life. Even though if my teacher keeps the Bhagavatam book in front of me, I'm not going to look into it. So
Congratulations. Congratulations. You
Thank
learned
you.
something. You learned something very deeply, and it's a very important lesson because in the short term, when we get away with something, we feel successful, and sometimes we should, because perhaps the circumstances are such that you have a right to get away with something. But when it comes to anything to do with our spiritual life, we're trying to become trustworthy. I read a Chinese proverb once, and it said, and this is also there for Ambika, it said that when you're weak, cultivate devotion. And when you're strong, cultivate trustworthiness. So both of these qualities, both of these characteristics, our devotion when we're helpless and our trustworthiness when we're strong, both of them are going to be required before we can enter into Vrindavan. Because we have to learn to stand behind so many people happily and be given instructions and directions how we can offer some service with a great sense of joy. We're not going to, as in this world, push to the front and show the world whatever the world is broadcasting. We want to learn to stand behind and watch and wait for that opportunity and then give our fullness. And take initiative as well. But that trustworthiness is very important. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Mataji. And I thank VIHE for giving me this opportunity to study and to listen from such great elevated souls. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. How are we doing, Prashanta? Do we have any more?
Hari Hari.
Hari.
We are, yeah, drinking the nectar, although we are talking about some kind of poison. But it's like with the gopis when they approach Krishna in the rasa dance. It's poison and nectar at the same time. So life is like this, that it's poison.
Sometimes we need a break, right? We need
Yeah.
a little less poison and maybe even a little less nectar. Just a break.
But the poison turns into nectar when we are forced to take shelter of Krishna, and in a very intense way, which otherwise we don't do. We go easy. But when the troubles come, then we really have to get serious and internal and dependent and all. And then, if we are fortunate, then we connect,
Yes.
and then there is a flow of nectar. So
I think we've all had these experiences. Some people consistently, some people randomly, but we've had these experiences to share together. So that makes powerful sangha, as we hear other people and go, oh yeah, I've had that, I've experienced that.
I'm very happy to hear from our student Lalita Pritimai, learning her good lessons. Yes, we always try to somehow drill into the consciousness of our students the importance of just having a pure purpose.
Yes.
And because the point is, you get what you desire.
Yeah,
You get what you desire, and if you desire the wrong thing, then you get the wrong thing and just waste your time. You just delay everything. So thank you, Lalita Pachimai.
Get your alignment right.
Yeah. Yes, I think Satchinandan Maharaj has a word he uses, it's tuning. That you got to tune, it's like when you try to catch something on the radio.
Yes.
You have to be very attentive, and then you just tune, and sometimes it's you have to go very far away, and sometimes you get close to the what you say what is it called,
the radio waves.
The wave. Yeah, you got to catch the wave, and you have to tune very attentively. And if you go one like fraction of a millimeter this side and it's not working, you go one fraction that side, it's not working, and there's just one little point in the middle where it connects, and then clear, the voice comes very clearly. So the voice of the heart, that's what we want to hear, the voice within, and get this support and guidance from the Lord of Vrindavan.
Jai Ho. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share and to meet some of your students on Zoom and to wish them the very best with their fine-tuning experience. It's funny, like a radio, you find that place and you've got it. But in life, it's the place keeps changing. It's more complicated, but the principle is the same. Yes.
So Jagattarini Mataji, we had 2 sessions, and we are already addicted. So we pray that you may return some other time in the context of this Vrindavan experience, and again, open your heart and share with us. We are little babies, and we are always looking towards the sky for the chakoras, yes, or the Bhagavatam, it says the babies in the nest, when the babies are small and they don't have their wings yet. So they sit in the net and they are just looking towards the sky with their beak open, and they just waiting for the mother, or sometimes the father, for the parents to come back and to feed them, and they can't exist on their own.
They can't fly anywhere yet.
Yes. So we depend on the wonderful association of personalities like you. Thank you so much, Jagattarini Mataji. I'm really, really most grateful and immensely happy that you have agreed to be with us. Hare Krishna.
My pleasure. Hare Krishna.